Hello, it's 4 p.m. here in South Korea and you're watching Arirang News. It's good to have you with us. I'm Kwon Jang-ho. Negotiations between North Korea and the US might be at a standstill, but inter-Korean talks are going full speed ahead. Not one, but two meetings were held yesterday between the two Koreas, one also with the UN command, further implementing previous agreements reached by the two leaders. We'll look further at the outcomes of those talks later in the show, but first we get the latest headlines by turning to our news centre, where Devin Whiting is waiting to get us up to speed. Devin.
Hi, Jang-ho. President Moon has ratified the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration, the deal signed last month by the leaders of the two Koreas after it was approved by his cabinet. But the parties in the National Assembly are not on board yet. Shin Se-min reports.
The Jae-in administration has ratified the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration and the military agreement, which were both reached by the two Koreas at the third Moon-Kim summit last month.
남북 관계의 발전과 군사적 긴장 완화는 한반도의 완전한 비핵화를 더 쉽게 만들어 촉진하는 역할을 하게 될 것입니다. 또한 우리 국민들의 생명과 안전을 보호하는 길일 뿐만 아니라 한반도 위기 요인을 없애 우리 경제에도 도움이 될 것입니다.
He said the agreement reached by the leaders of the two Koreas will help speed up the North's denuclearization while laying the foundations for economic opportunities for the South. President Moon added that the ratification of the inter-Korean agreement will first and foremost benefit residents living near the border area, as they had long been disadvantaged. And he called on related ministries to do their part in carrying out the ratified declaration. President Moon said inducing the regime to change and become a normal state through dialogue and cooperation could, in a way, improve the human rights conditions in the North, rather than simply pressuring the regime. The ratification comes as the Ministry of Government Legislation had said that the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration does not need parliamentary approval for ratification, as the overreaching agreement, the Panmunjom Declaration reached at April summit, is already being reviewed by Parliament after the government submitted it last month. Rival political parties at the National Assembly clashed over the cabinet's approval of the summit agreement, with the ruling Democratic Party saying that the parliament should ratify the Panmunjom Declaration signed in April, while the conservative opposition bloc claimed that the administration is disregarding parliament. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, starting from the 1st of November, North Korea is set to halt all forms of live-fire artillery drills and close its gun ports along the northern limit line, the two Koreas' de facto sea border. Those steps are part of establishing maritime buffer zones, as agreed by South and North Korea last month in Pyongyang. Along its western coast, the North has some 1,000 gun ports and numerous artillery guns with a range of up to 27 kilometers. White House National Security Advisor John Bolton has suggested that the second North Korea-U.S. summit will take place not this year but next. Bolton is now visiting Russia. In an interview with a local radio station, he said President Trump and Kim Jong-un will probably meet again, quote, after the first of the year. Bolton added that Trump is determined to pursue direct negotiations with the North Korean leader and that the president is going to do everything he can to get Pyongyang to keep the denuclearization commitment it made in the first summit back in June. Responding to a question from the radio host, Bolton strongly denied that the U.S. last year discussed the idea of a nuclear strike on North Korea. The European Union has reaffirmed that pressure on North Korea will continue until a denuclearization deal is done, and it says the pressure is working. That's what the EU's Foreign Affairs and Security Policy team said Monday when asked whether the sanctions might be used as leverage. The team went on to say that monitoring and verification remain crucial, and those efforts will need to be multilateral. It also urged the North to sign on to several international treaties on the safe use of nuclear energy and onto the ban on nuclear weapons. The EU team said it supports South Korea's leading role in the current talks with the North and praised President Moon's efforts to promote peace. In other news, South Korea's producer prices in September hit a high not seen in more than 5 years. The nation's central bank says this summer's extremely hot weather pushed up the price of fruits and vegetables in particular. Ko Ryun-hee has the details.
Data released by Korea's central bank hints that consumer prices will rise in the coming months. The Bank of Korea revealed Tuesday that last month's producer price index, a key barometer of future inflation, hit its highest level since August 2013. September's index hit 105.78, which is 0.3% higher than the previous month. This is a 2.7% increase from the same period last year and extends the on-year streak of gains to a 23rd straight month. In particular, producer prices of agricultural goods rose 1.6% compared to the previous month, mainly because of the record heat wave this summer. In August, temperatures in Seoul sizzled at a 111-year high, and the intensity of the heat wave led to supply shortages. Prices of tomatoes soared by a whopping 96.7%, and bell peppers jumped by 92.6% over the same period. The overall producer price index for agricultural, forestry, and marine products marked its highest point since related figures were first compiled in 2000. Meanwhile, prices of manufacturing products rose by 0.3% on month due to rising international oil prices. Coal and petroleum products prices increased by 3.4%. The Bank of Korea added the prices of utilities, electricity, gas, and water also spiked 1.5% because the government's revision to the progressive electricity billing rates only came into effect in August. 고른이 아리랑 뉴스.
The government has vowed to turn the external risks to the Korean economy into opportunities by diversifying the country's trade and investment. At a meeting on Tuesday, the Minister of Economy and Finance, Kim Dong-yeon, said the government will deal proactively with rising trade protectionism and seek new trade blocs such as the G20, the Pacific Alliance, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. As the main risks, he cited the U.S. government's closer monitoring of China for currency manipulation and its possible new tariffs of 20% on Korean vehicles. Still, the minister said Korea's financial market is stable, recording this year a net foreign capital inflow of more than $7 billion. In August, BMW Korea recalled more than 100,000 vehicles because of a faulty engine part. Now the company is recalling tens of thousands more because of the same problem. Jae-in reports.
BMW Group Korea will voluntarily recall nearly 66,000 BMWs and Minis to repair faulty parts, according to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport on Tuesday. The recall will begin on November 26 and involve 52 models, including Mini Cooper D models and 118D compact cars. The Transport Ministry said the German carmaker had submitted a recall plan to the ministry on Monday. The recall was prompted by the BMW probe led by Transport Ministry officials and civilian experts that last month found the 118D models have defective engine parts known as EGR or exhaust gas recirculation, but were not part of the previous recall back in August. About 30,000 vehicles subject to the recall were equipped with the faulty engine parts but were not recalled back in August due to a low risk of fire. The German carmaker still maintains that the vehicles subject to the new recall have low fire risk and that the recall is only precautionary. This year, more than 40 BMW vehicles have burst into flames, and of those cars, more than 10 vehicles were not on the recall list. 최시영, 아리랑 뉴스.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The two Koreas are continuing their cooperation drive across a number of fields. The latest area in which they're going to work together is forestry projects. Park Hee-jun breaks down what was discussed on Monday between the officials from the two Koreas.
South and North Korea have agreed to jointly tackle pine tree pests as well as other tree diseases through March next year as part of efforts to increase forestry cooperation. South Korea will provide the North with the necessary pesticides in November. This came after the two Koreas held forestry talks on Monday at the recently opened Inter-Korean Liaison Office in Kaesong. The South Korean delegation was led by Park Jung-ho, the Deputy Minister of the Korea Forest Service, and the North Korean delegation by Kim Sung-jun from the North's Ministry of Land and Environmental Protection. According to a joint press release, the two sides decided to periodically modernize North Korea's tree nurseries and complete 10 of them by the end of the year. To realize that, South Koreans will conduct field studies in the north. They also agreed to boost joint projects related to the prevention of forest fires and the protection of local ecosystems. They'll also host seminars on science and technology related to forestry.
Seoul and Pyongyang will thrash out further details through an exchange of documents.
We discussed detailed practical measures during this round of talks. We reaffirmed our commitment to implement the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration and didn't disagree on much.
Since the first Inter-Korean summit of the year on April 27th, the two Koreas have been pushing to boost cooperation on forestry projects, one of the few fields that does not violate international sanctions against the North. Monday's discussions were the second working-level talk since the first round was held in July. The first meeting led to a joint inspection in the North on pest control and diseases. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Now, in the studio with us today to further discuss these latest talks, we have Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung University. Professor Song, it's good to have you in the show again.
Good to be here.
So, as we just heard, the two Koreas held talks on Monday to discuss cooperation on forestry projects, as agreed in previous summits. Now, they've agreed to modernize 10 tree nurseries by the end of this year in North Korea, as well as joint projects related to other forestry projects such as prevention of forest fires and such. So for our viewers outside of Korea, can you explain why forestry cooperation is important to the two Koreas and what you make of these latest developments?
Right, in several regards it's significant. It's an implementation of the Panmunjom and Pyeongyang Declaration agreement. So in that sense, there's an implementation stage to it. And this is the first one to go with it. And also it's an economic one. And economic cooperation is kind of a key in the further development of inter-Korean relationship and also North Korean development. So I think that North Korea is very keen on how this develops and how it kind of puts on a best foot forward in a sense. And the best feature of that is, as reported, that it is not directly subject to the international sanctions.
But although they came to some sorts of agreements, there was perhaps not always the best atmosphere in these talks, apparently. So despite the agreement reaching between the two sides, North Korean officials, they expressed complaints about how the talks went, saying that the talks failed to meet expectations, and added that if future talks go just as these ones just did, the North would not harbour any expectations. That's what they said. I'm just quoting there. So what do you think they were unhappy about? You've mentioned that these might not have been affected directly through sanctions, but could the sanctions, UN sanctions, have played some sort of part in the discussions as well?
Right. This does not directly violate the sanctions, but it does violate the spirit of the sanctions, meaning the sanctions has been very effective in bringing the North Korea out to the negotiation table. U.S. is very firm on it. The EU is also firm on it, or has no reason to go against what the U.S. is pushing. And South Korea is necessarily very cautious about it. I think that what they said in the negotiation with the forestry matters is that it's not that South Korea is not enthusiastic about it, but there are provisos. They have to see what the sanction situation is and what kind of opposition they face from other countries, because at this point, South Korea is necessarily keeping a close watch with the allies in making the international regime on the nuclear matters when it comes to North Korea. So South Korea is being cautious.
But how actually important is this kind of forestry kind of projects to North Korea? I mean, and especially with South Korea having such a history with success with forestry as well. We're one of the examples cited by the UN for successfully reforesting a nation. So what can North Korea expect to gain from these kind of projects?
Well, I think that North Korea, among other projects, that this is the first one. But the first one is a very special one because it's easy to implement. But at the same time, the impact is pretty great in terms of how to replenish the forestry industry, and also it affects the tourism, and also it affects other areas of development. But however, I think that their emphasis on this one is because this can provide a model for how to cooperation will proceed. I think they want to telegraph it to the Kaesong models and also the Kumgangsan tours. So this becomes a kind of a jumping point into others. So the forest per se has a meaning, but it has more of a symbolic meaning and also function as a model to other areas of cooperation.
Of course, these talks weren't the only meeting that was held on Monday as well. There was another trilateral meeting held in Pyeongyang as well between the two Koreas and also including the United Nations Command, which is the main body in charge of the inter-Korean border region as well. They gave updates on the operation to remove mines from the joint area as well as further agreements to disarm the joint security area. How important is this kind of continuing step towards demilitarizing the border, especially in cooperation with the UN command, which is obviously led by the US?
Right. First and foremost, the easing the tension, especially the military tension, is always a welcome news. And this is also welcome because this is, again, the implementation part of the agreement reached from the inter-Korean summit meetings. So in that sense, very significant. But I guess it's the importance of it is kind of a rolling back of the status of where the demilitarized zone should be. I mean, the term demilitarized zone necessarily means that there is devoid of weapons, but the reality has been, and the history has been, that area has been the most military zone, especially after 1976 when the axe murder incident had happened. So I think it's significant in rolling back the status where it is supposed to be the demilitarized zone, and I think the UN and also South Korea is welcome.
So these talks were also part of the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration that was reached between President Moon and North Korean Kim Jong-un in their last summit in September. Now, President Moon Jae-in administration, they've now ratified this this agreement, and by ratifying this, you know, as part of going ahead with all the agreements that was reached there. Of course, this time it didn't need parliamentary approval, as it was said to be an agreement that was subsidiary to the broader Pyeongyang Joint Declaration that was signed in April as well. That was already ratified as well. Opposition lawmakers have perhaps shown some unhappiness about this because they're saying it maybe circumvents the need for discussion of these kind of things. But nonetheless, the administration has ratified it. What does it mean now that it has been ratified, and how does this change things?
Right. The ratification of any kind of treaties or any kind of agreement with other countries, other entities, is that it makes it official. And if it's a treaty, then it makes it now has a full force of the law under Korea. However, we're talking about the three declaration and agreements, Panmunjom and Pyeongyang, and the military-related ones. And what the opposition is saying is that the first one is still not ratified. There is an ongoing discussion and also disputes as to whether it is a good one or not. I expect it will be ratified at this point, at some point, but the dispute is that the Moon Jae-in government ratified the next two of them when the first one is not yet ratified. So, and the logic is a little bit shaky that because the second and third one is dependent upon the first one, so it doesn't need to be ratified by the National Assembly, which is correct. But in terms of timing, if second and third one goes ahead first without the ratification of first, that causes a little bit of dispute, and that's why there is a little bit of noise.
Do you think he's pushing ahead too quickly at this point then? Even if there's no, like, as you said, there's no official ratification yet?
Well, I think that there's no reason not to ratify it. It's a declaration. I think it's a step towards the right direction. Opposition is saying that it doesn't meet the expectation of the denuclearization and so on and so forth. But at this point, this whole process has been kind of a two-step process where inter-Korean relationship is one, but then there's North Korea and the U.S. Negotiation, which in many people's mind, it's a main event in terms of how it affects the sanctions and the future of the economic development. So in that sense, I don't think there is very scant reason not to ratify this.
Let's shift focus for a bit before towards the US now. So Trump has announced that he intends to withdraw the US from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF Treaty in short.
Right.
That was the agreement that was in place between Russia to destroy all ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles. Some have said that it was somewhat successful, as it destroyed many of nuclear weapons that Russia and the US had. But can you briefly explain for us why Trump wants to pull out of this now and why it matters?
Well, I think that we've seen this time and time again, that when Donald Trump is not satisfied with certain treaties, he frequently says he will pull out. And he did pull out in many of the treaties that he didn't like. So I think that this is an extension of that kind of sentiment, that kind of strategy, or that kind of tactics. Although it has been successful to an extent, Russia and also US as well has been implementing or making these nuclear threats in many different areas. So in that sense, the violations on both sides. But I think that Donald Trump is making this noise to make the treaty more workable, if you want to look at it in positive sense. But I think that there is a secondary motive that he wants to include China as well. China is not part of the treaty, and China is one of the apparent kind of ambition is to be a military heavyweight at this point. So I think that it goes into the thinking of Donald Trump's the foreign policy that China has to be targeted. He started with the trade war anyways, so in that sense it's an extension of those, and by way of making the negotiation more palatable to his strategy, he is making a threat of pulling it out.
I mean, the reason why I've shifted to this topic is because although North Korea, of course, is not part of this INF treaty, some say it sends the wrong message to Pyongyang and that the US cannot be trusted to keep these kinds of treaties. What do you think, Professor? Do you think these kind of criticisms are fair?
Right. I think it's entirely fair, because any kind of treaties, any kind of contract for that matter, has to have a finality to it. But if subsequent authority or the president can pull out these treaties, then there's no finality to any kind of agreement. He pulled out already Iran treaty and also Paris treaty as well, and also he threatened and renegotiated NAFTA and Korea-U.S. Treaty as well, economic treaty. So in that sense, North Korea is justified in thinking that whether getting into any kind of agreement with the U.S. Is final. And if they pull out or denuclearization on that basis, probably it doesn't give them a peace of mind.
And finally, just quickly before we go as well, the US National Security Advisor, John Bolton, now he gave a recent interview saying that he now expects the second Trump-Kim summit to take place after January 1st, after the start of next year. It's the first time any US official has said that it won't happen this year.
Right.
There was suspected, of course, that it could happen because Trump delayed it after the midterm elections. But, I mean, what are your thoughts now? Do you think it won't happen until next year?
Well, I think that after the Kavanaugh hearing or the confirmation, Donald Trump lost any kind of urgency on this matter. So in that sense, he's going back to his favorite tactic of negotiation, which is to have a leverage on the other party, and frequently that leverage tends to be a time. I think that we're seeing that North Korea is more, I wouldn't want to say desperate, but they're more eager to get this one done than the U.S. I think that gives an edge to the U.S., and knowing or having seen how Donald Trump operates in this kind of negotiation situation, I think that Donald Trump will try to utilize that leverage to the fullest So I think that this trickling out of the delaying this time frame, probably it'll continue depending on how the North Korea responds to it. I think that if North Korea pulls out of their encroached position of not giving up substantially, probably this will continue. Probably it's going to be a long bout of when you see the fishing battle between the big fish. Probably that's kind of a dynamics we'll see.
Yes, I guess we'll have to see who makes the next move. Professor Song, as always, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's where we'll end it for today. I'll be back same time tomorrow with more in-depth analysis of the day's top stories from Korea. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.
Mukbang is all the rage these days. One-man content creators from Korea have set ablaze a new global trend. Type in mukbang on YouTube and you retrieve tons of videos showing people eating delicious food. We recommend to you 3 Korean dishes for mukbang. For bibimbap, place various veggies such as shiitake mushroom, cucumber and carrot, as well as a fried egg on rice, and mix everything with gochujang and sesame oil. It is known for its colorful appearance and variety of ingredients that is affordable and easy to eat. Try grilling some samgyeopsal on a grill right in front of you. Once fully cooked, dip in samjang and wrap it in lettuce and sesame leaf with garlic. This practice of cooking meat on a grill built into the table has originated in Korea, and generally people enjoy Korean barbecue with soju, a traditional Korean liquor. Fried chicken is of course found elsewhere in the world, but Korea is particularly famous for its unique style of fried chicken with some varieties offered with a special sauce. Tons of different recipes have been developed over the years with the use of various ingredients such as garlic, honey, green onion, soy sauce and more. Just as samgyeopsal and soju make a perfect pair, Korean-style chicken is enjoyed with beer. These 3 addictive dishes present difficult choices for Koreans every evening. What would you want to try for a mukbang?